You're hanging out in the House of Sunny podcast, where it's always sunny, mostly because of your host, comedian and YouTuber, Sunny Lohman. Want to know what Sunny and her friends are thinking about this week? Well, here she is, Sunny Lohman.
Hey, welcome everybody to the podcast today. I'm here with Doug from The Rational Capitalist. Hey, Doug.
Hello, Sunny.
And we're going to talk today. I've had kind of an epiphany after watching a bunch of interviews with Douglas Murray about his new book. What is his new book, Doug?
I don't know.
This is what I get for not writing things down. The Madness of Crowds. That's the name of the book. And
Correct.
He has a chapter. He talks about race. He talks about gender. He talks about trans. He talks about gay. He talks about all of these off-limit topics. It's basically a Dave Chappelle show in a book for intellectuals, because I think he covers all these topics and he does it in an honest and not no censorship way. And he's talking about what's wrong with our society and what's gone wrong and what can we do about it and the whole cancel culture and all of that. And it made me kind of realize that, here's my epiphany, I'll just get right into it and you can comment, that politics is starting, it's the Democrat Party is fractured, the Republican Party is fractured, objectivists are fractured, libertarians are fractured. Like, everybody seems to be breaking apart, and people are like, oh, it's just the culture today, Trump is divisive, blah, blah, blah. But what I think it is it's free speech people and not free speech people. It's cancel culture versus people who want a total Wild West in speech. And like, why you have objectivists who don't defend the Alex Jones, and then you have objectivists who do defend Alex Jones. Whether we like him or not, we defend that he should not have been deplatformed like that by everybody overnight. And I mean, it was creepy as fuck. And that's wrong. It's immoral. And all of the people being silenced online by the tech companies. Either you're an objectivist who's opposed to that, or you're an objectivist who's like, it's a private company. But I don't believe that it's because they're sort of rationalizing or they're rationalists about their premises. I think they like it. I think they actually want Alex Jones to shut up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
So to me, the fracture and the walkaway movement on the Democrat side, I mean, you hear those walkaway stories, it's always, I realized the media was lying to me. Like, it's people who had an awakening because they realized that the information they were getting was fake. And that and they're uber supportive of free speech and freedom on the internet and alternative media, new media, as Andrew Breitbart used to call it. So to me, it seems like it's the dividing line is free speech or cancel culture, right?
Yeah, and I think more broadly, it's reason versus anti-reason. It's people that are totally welcome and open to ideas because they can prove their case, and the more light you shine on your opponent's weak case, the better it is for you. Great. You want to talk? Go ahead and talk. Make a fool out of yourself. I'll talk and I'll make an argument and I'll win in the broader culture because I'm right. And the people who have a weak case, and we got into this last week when we were talking about children, when you can't prove your case and you're, in a sense, non-cognitive, you're not relying on evidence and reason, and you're emotional and you're angry and you're defensive and you want to shut the other guy up because he makes you feel bad, and the way you go about illustrating your case is to scare the other side and paint the other side as creepy and scary
and immoral and
smear,
right.
You don't just say, hey, here's why this guy is wrong and here's what it will lead to. Think about it. Think about this logically. This is what this will do. No, you say that guy is going to kill you. That guy wants to hurt you. That guy's a demon. Don't think about it. Just act. And, and this affects people in different ways. I think there's nuances to how this manifests. It's not like everyone is just, either a non-cognitive moron or you're a professorial man of reason. Like this stuff in the objectivist community, libertarian community, those people, I think the way that manifests is a little more nuanced than it does in just like the crazy left and the cancel culture. But I think you're absolutely right, and that's why it's not really Republican Democrat.
I don't think it is anymore, and it's why as an objectivist, I feel like, okay, I'm this objectivist. I'm part of this community that's very intellectual. We love to debate stuff, talk to each other, chew ideas. I mean, Doug and I were in a university club, objectivist club, where, I don't remember ever, what I really liked about that group of people was that we used to argue all the time, and it was really fun and interesting. Mm-hmm. And then when I left that circle and went and moved around, I moved to California, I moved to Denver, and I was trying to replicate that. We would like put a study group together or something, and everybody was it was like memorization. Everybody agreed. Nobody challenged what they were reading. Nobody was chewing anything, and it was boring. And I just was never able to kind of have that.
Yeah, that's
kind of
Bible
a study group again. Yeah,
it was.
It was like Bible study versus like really an intellectual experience.
And the Sunday school teachers chastising anyone who doesn't remember the 10 Commandments. That's the sense that you got from that group versus a group where, you're willing to question and reason and argue because that's healthy.
Yeah.
And that's how you learn.
So nevertheless, even 10 years ago, I felt very free in objectivist circles to challenge everything, including things that objectivists said. And then there were some online bullies that started, what we have behind the scenes been calling sort of jihads against people, but character assassinations against objectivists who were fringe or who were kind of, like what was it? Diana Shea was one of them. And that was like one of the first ones where people actually made a website to take down a person. Like objectivist people made a website to take down a person who wasn't even, what harm was she doing really? And I think I remember one of them saying to me, well, if you Google objectivism, her stuff comes up. And I'm like, oh my God, like the horror. We can't have people reading stuff and thinking for themselves.
No.
We have to make sure that the information that we're putting out there with the label objectivism is, stamped with approval.
Yes, our literature.
Oh my God, what is wrong with you? And now those people, so that happened. And then a couple years later, another kind of thing like that. And, it's a sickness, man. It's like, objectivist, the philosophy of objectivism is a couple of things that fly right in the face of that. Number one, you're supposed to reason. You're supposed to be objective. That means you're supposed to do a lot of thinking and, run your ideas through reality and make sure that they're right and test them and peer review. And if you're not able to talk to people, you can't test your ideas. You can't test your knowledge of your ideas. You can't test if you can actually defend your ideas. This happened to me a few times when I was younger, because now I know everything. No. But when I was younger, I would start having a conversation with like a leftist on campus or something and realize I have no idea how to defend like some very abstract idea like freedom. Like I just got owned in an argument. I was fumbling around. I couldn't defend it. And that made me have to figure it out.
Right. That's the adversarial system. And that's the whole point.
So when I did that podcast a few months ago, when we did that podcast, critical of the chairman of the Ayn Rand Institute's position on Muslim immigration, or lack of position, which is how I characterize it. he says one thing, then he says another thing. He's constantly saying, hey, I never said that we should have open immigration for Muslims. And then the next thing he's saying, we shouldn't have open immigration for Muslims. So it's like it's all over the place. We proved it with his own words. And this is not objective. This is not, what I was trying to say was, Yaron's not a professional intellectual. He doesn't write things down. He's sloppy. And yet he has somehow become the ideological leader of objectivism. And he's out there and he's introduced on all the talk shows as, hey, he runs the Ayn Rand Institute. That gives him a certain credibility. And I don't think he deserves it. I really think that he wants to be a radio star. He wants to be loose and fast and loose with his ideas. Fine. I mean, I don't really have anything against him, but I don't think that he should have the position he has if that's what he's going to do. And that's all I said, right? And for that, a lot of people on Facebook unfriended me, objectivists, including friends in real life. And some of you might remember we had on the show Jonathan Hoenig with his new book, which was, he's working with the Ayn Rand Institute. He takes stuff that she wrote. They give that to him. He's able to put half of her writings into a book that he's making. And then I don't know how it works, but, it was his idea. But then they kind of forced all the ARI intellectuals on him, I assume. All of these people got to write a piece of it and be in the book. Some of them, I don't think deservedly should have been in that book. And it was like the usual suspects, And then he had people in there that are freaking weird.
Yeah.
That should not be in official objective, like people who are really, really weird online, really weird behavior, stalking behavior, like people who might be seriously autistic, or something. And I didn't fucking bring any of that up when I interviewed him. Like, I let him skate. I did a total softball interview, which maybe I shouldn't have done. So now later, like after that, what happens? I criticize Yaron Brook, and now he has unfriended me. That's what a pussy he is. He didn't write me a private message and say, hey, I have a problem with this.
No, I just don't want to hear it.
I don't want to be friends with somebody who would criticize the head of the Ayn Rand Institute. How the hell? What is wrong with you? That is not objectivism.
And Sonny, in all of these unfriendings and all this angst over that, how many people have said, this is why you're wrong? Let me point to this. And this is, here's an argument. And here. Nobody.
You know what has happened, though? I'll tell you what's happened. Dozens and dozens of private messages. Oh, my God, thank you for saying that. You're right. Like, everybody is afraid to say it. Everybody thinks it. And everybody's afraid to say it. And one of the things that Douglas Murray says in his book, in the wider culture, so what I'm doing is saying, this is going on in our little microcosm of objectivism. And I think we're all aware that it does mirror the wider culture and what's happening in the wider culture. What's happening is that there are ideas and words and phrases that you're allowed to have and some that you're not allowed to have. You're not allowed to be a conspiracy theorist, which is, a made-up word about anybody who questions or is skeptical about the mainstream media narrative or the government narrative. Like, if you're skeptical, you're a conspiracy theorist. And that, there are people who are kooky and have wild conspiracy theories, like the woman at the AOC town hall yesterday who said that we're going to die in a month and we need to start eating babies. I'd say that's tinfoil hat stuff.
Well, but that was based on I think she's been outed as a troll, but that was actually based on a Swedish professor who said that we need to start.
I'm just kidding. I just wanted to bring that into the show.
Yeah, I think she was outed. I just was reading something about that.
Yeah, I saw that and I thought.
Although her position is so crazy, right? She said the world's going to end in 3 months and we should eat babies. AOC said the world's going to end in 10 months, and a Swedish professor said we should eat other people. So, like, is she that crazy compared to what they're saying?
And what AOC advocates in the Green New Deal would kill a lot of people. So
get rid of cows and airplanes and cars and electricity.
How many babies would die when the electricity is shut off? Really,
Yeah.
I mean, legitimately, a lot.
And it's sort of like, okay, now you've gone too far. This 3-month eat babies thing, don't you know it's 10 years and it's eat adults?
Right. That's so funny. Okay. So my point is just that in the wider culture, we have these established things we're allowed to talk about, and everybody knows they're bullshit. Everybody knows that man-made global warming is suspect. Everybody knows that, if they're being honest. But we're not allowed to stop recycling. Or
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you
Don't even
still
question.
Yeah, right. I mean, you still kind of have to like follow the lead of the people in charge.
The green idea.
And Douglas Murray doesn't bring that particular one up, but he says, like, take men and women. We all know that we're different, but we can't say that.
Yeah.
And he says it's very, like, it's mentally bad for us and for society to not be able to say what we know to be true. And it's damaging. I mean, it's soul damaging. And it kind of reminds me, I don't know if this was in Ominous Parallels by Leonard Peikoff, but he talked about what the Nazis used to do to the Jews in the camps, that their strategy was to challenge anything sort of solid. It was like a psychological warfare of, terror, like mental terror to make them have to
question their own senses.
Question their sanity and their own senses, right. It's gaslighting.
Gaslighting, yeah.
And so it's like massive gaslighting, and we all have to buy into it. And if we don't, I mean, look at this situation where I do a podcast where I criticize a guy who has no intellectual credibility, like factually. He's not a philosopher. He's not a PhD. Not that matters, but he used to say, "I'm just a businessman." It's more that he doesn't
have an argument. It's more that he doesn't have an argument, and he doesn't have a position.
Yeah, he doesn't even have a position, and that's what I'm being critical of. And yet I'm being called a racist if I don't agree with him, but I don't even know what that means to agree with him. So how about we first figure out what the hell he's talking about? So I'm supposed to, and actually that really mirrors what Douglas Murray says the left has done. There is no absolute. And so it can be anything. And if that's not, what it is it's groupthink.
It was like the Russian collusion, where you'd say, what exactly is Russian collusion? What do you mean? Well, it's Russian collusion. He's hacking our democracy. Well, what do you mean? Like he hacked the machines?
Yeah,
or he
right.
ran a Facebook ad? Like, what do you actually mean?
Right.
And no one could ever explain it.
Right.
You were carrying water for the Russians.
How dare you challenge it? You're a Trumpist.
Are you a Russian agent?
Or just that you're a mindless Trump fan. If you're like, well, what collusion? Like, the election meddling, where's the dead body is what I used to say about it. Yeah. You don't do an investigation till there's a body. You can't say there's a murder until you have a body.
Right.
So where's the body in the Russian collusion thing? Where's the actual, show me the election that was altered because of something, some crime.
So what are you, a Russian agent? What do you love Trump?
I'm just,
Are you a psychopath? What's wrong with you?
Yeah. So, but what Douglas Murray says is that
nothing's absolute.
Nothing's absolute. That psychologically, that's damaging because really it can be anything, and it just whenever the authorities decide what it is. You just have to go along with it, and you don't know what it's going to be from one moment to the next, and it can contradict what it was last week. And that's exactly what objectivism is right now. Today, we're for a Muslim immigration ban. Tomorrow, we're for open Muslim immigration. And it's insanity.
Well, let me I always like to make the broader point, because what you're describing is really, in a sense, that the history and tragedy of human action, throughout the eons, where, people tend, and I don't know why this is. I mean, I'm not a social scientist, but it seems like, when you you see ideas throughout the ages. Someone comes up with an idea, and then people kind of codify it, and it becomes almost, we have religions, and then, you have people enforcing those religions with physical force, through the churches or through organized means or through the king, and it's really the rarity, the exception is the founding fathers, where suddenly we have a culture of reason where people are questioning things, and you can challenge, and you can criticize the government, you can criticize authority, and that's welcome and okay, and it's seen as essential to surviving and living a good life, is questioning authority. That mode is the exception, and we're supposed to be, as sort of like classical liberals, we're the ones in that scientific tradition, arguing against the people that imprisoned Galileo, or that
right.
burned scientists at the stake, for questioning religion. We're the ones who are standing up against those people who are bullies and who are authorities and who want to enforce their religions at the point of the gun. And, we're supposed to be standing in a tradition of people who are open to reason, who make arguments and make cases. We're not the ones who, bully people or try and intimidate people with arguments from authority or whatever. And, you see this tendency, and it seems like the need for constant vigilance, if you're a person of reason, where you constantly have to recognize when this is happening, even amongst people who ostensibly should be advocates of reason and open-mindedness, because it happens everywhere. It happens in every group.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying is it happens in every group, including the group that's not only about reason, but explicitly about thinking for yourself. I mean, it's a very explicit virtue to think for yourself and be independent-minded. And yet these people are trying to create a mass agreement because they don't want to be challenged. And what they're doing is, I don't want to make enemies. I didn't mean to make enemies, although I'm not surprised if Yaron would be like, well, I don't really like her because she's calling me out on stuff. But if you're an objectivist, what you should be doing is challenging me. Like, talk to me about it. And instead, I was called a bunch of names. And that's what the left does, or not even the left. I would say it's the two sides now. It's the intimidate, bully, label, call names, shut down speech, and everybody else who just wants to be free to most people do not think that bearded men with penises should go into the women's bathroom. 95% of people don't think that.
Right.
And yet we have to pretend like we fucking do, or we are mean, and we're labeled names, and we're intimidated into silence. And they have ruined, I think, what was it? It was Owen Benjamin, comedian. His career was ruined for saying children should, as young as 3, 4, 5 years old, should not be given transition hormones. Everybody knows that's goddamn child abuse. Everybody knows that. But he was canceled. He was canceled in Hollywood because he said that. And so that's cancel culture, and that is what this book, The Madness of Crowds, is trying to shine the light on. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, wow, this is what's going on in objectivism. This is what's going on in the wider culture. And it really does now boil down to who's willing to have a conversation and who's not.
Right. So. It's very rare to see that sort of openness. And, I was going to make a political point too, which is that I remember when we were kids and the left was usually associated with civil liberties and freedom of speech. And I realize now that was such a crock of shit, because the left at that time advocated for free speech because they weren't in power or didn't feel like they were in power. So at that time, they needed free speech more as a tactic, not as a principle. And, whenever we see actual leftist regimes get into power, what's the first thing they do? They shut down the media, they start killing people, they burn books, so they're authoritarians. And the only reason they were successful in posing as advocates of free speech and free ideas because it resonated morally with the wider culture. So they took the moral high ground by saying, we're advocates of free speech. And for Americans, that immediately gives you the moral, or it used to at least, it gives you the moral high ground. And so they were able to be successful in a lot of ways in gaining power because
so hopefully that means that we will be successful because we are the advocates for freedom and free speech.
I was kind of going to go there, but this is my fear, which is now that they are in power, they've turned this on its head and they're saying free speech is not a value. It's no longer the moral ideal, and they're able to do this and get away with it and, possibly inculcate this notion into younger people, which they're already doing. And we see this, there was that New York Times article that, what free speech is killing us or something. We're seeing this everywhere where free speech is no longer kind of a moral commandment, like everyone knows free speech is the essence of being American. And to challenge that is, you've got to be crazy. You got to be anti-American. You're a bad person. Well, now they're saying what? Well, I advocate free speech, but if you say
hurt
something
someone's
that
feelings, they might kill themselves, and then it's your fault.
Yeah, then you're doing damage, and so they're undercutting the essence of what free speech is, which is, free speech is meant to be challenging and to cause stress and to be, that's the whole point. That's why we're not protecting people, the 99% of people, we're protecting the one guy who challenges everybody. And so it's meant to cause stress and anxiety when someone challenges you. And, that's the person they want to shut down. They want to shut down the dissenter, of course. And they always do this, but they couldn't do it in America the way you could do it in, Cambodia or Cuba or Venezuela, where you can just take over the government, shut down the state media. It's too hard. And so, they got into power and all of a sudden the internet rose and we've got Fox News and talk radio. And, suddenly conservatives and right wingers are able to talk and freely, challenge the left and challenge their ideas, and they're not kind of taking it anymore. Mm-hmm. And so what do they go after? Well, if they go after Fox News and they try and demonize Fox News or marginalize it. I'm not saying Fox News is necessarily the exponent of all of it.
Do you know what happens to me online when I'm in maybe some of these other groups that are kind of non-political, and maybe I say something that's a little political? Mm-hmm. The smear is, and I don't really mix, I guess, with a lot of leftists typically. And the smear is, well, that's the Fox News narrative, or, when you watch Fox News, that's just the immediate put down. You're getting it from Fox News and you're just a zombie.
Yeah, there's no argument.
No
it's
argument
just
at all.
Guilt by association. Yeah. You're with the crazy crowd, right?
And when I criticized Yaron, it was, and his lack of stance on Muslim immigration, I was called a racist and a bigot. Like, what? A racist, a bigot, a xenophobe. That is the intimidation, the shutting down, and then they try to associate me with like the worst trolls online, that I have nothing to do with, but they'll try to connect me with them to discredit me. So it's all intimidation and bullying tactics. I don't really care. I'm not affected by this. I mean, I feel like if you are affected by that, good riddance. If you can't allow me to say what I think and just say, hey, I don't agree, and maybe argue it with me and maybe make your case. You don't have to make your case, but to dislike me or, to punish me, I think, because you don't like something I've said is cancel culture. And so that's what's going on in the wider world. And what Douglas Murray says, one thing he says, and I think this is true, he says the only people who can really say the truth, say what they really think, are people who have no hierarchy above them. He calls it a wobbly hierarchy. So, and it's funny because he said the only people really free are writers and comedians.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, that's me. And that's why I say,
Yeah.
But, even if you own a business, you can't speak out if your customers might leave you. You can't have your life ruined. Because
or your board of directors, or your shareholders, or whatever.
Or look at that
situation.
poor baker who gets attacked by the government anyway. Like, he owns his own business. He says, I'm not going to bake this cake. And then some trans freak lawyer files complaints against him and goes after him, harasses him, tries to destroy the man. And the authorities side with this freak lawyer instead of the businessman. I mean, that's kind of what's really troubling to me, is that we have all these scolds, these woke scolds, these SJWs, Twitter is full of them. And it's or Antifa say, who are really violent out there trying to enforce whatever it is they like or don't like today. And they're backed up by the authorities. So the people in authority, that's what you were saying earlier, is like they kind of have taken control of the country. Because if you're in Portland, the whole, all the authorities are part of that the cancel culture.
Yeah, their boss is the mayor.
And so if Antifa's out there beating people up, they allow that to happen. And if you fight back, you'll be arrested, as what happened in New York City when the Proud Boys, who were being attacked, and piss got thrown at them, and they were threatened, and the venue was threatened. And I mean, it was just like a campaign of harassment and threats. And the Proud Boys are walking to their car, and they get jumped by a couple of Antifa guys, and the Proud Boys beat the shit out of them, and the Proud Boys went to jail.
And you remember, like, the 78 Skokie, the Nazis in Skokie in the 70s, when, the Nazis were wanting to march, and the classic liberals at that time, the ACLU and stuff, actually stood up for the Nazis' right, to march, because, why? Well, that was in the tradition of American free speech.
Right. And the cops were out there blocking and defending them, protecting them.
And why did they see that as a value at that time? Because they were on the fringe. The left was on the fringe, and they knew, hey, if we shut these guys down, they're going to shut us down. So we have to advocate for, total freedom. And then once they get control of everything, now they're the ones who are Nazis. They're the ones who are acting like fascists. If they don't like you, they shut you down, they physically intimidate you, they own the police, they tell the police to stand down when someone's getting beaten. So to me, I think your identification that this is sort of like basic level freedom, reason, classical liberalism versus fascism, in a sense, is spot on.
Yeah, and I think you can tell who's on what side based on their stance on people being canceled and how they react when they get into a disagreement with somebody. Do they act like, I don't agree? Or do they want to shut the person down and just insult them and smear them and so on?
It's sort of the way you react psychologically to a book burning. Like, if I see people burning books, I might say, they're on private property, and they can go ahead and burn their books. I mean, they have the legal right to do that. But I would be, appalled by that. I'd be like, oh my God, look at those freaks. They're burning books. Like, who in the hell would do that? That's so creepy and weird, That's the reaction you should have, not, well, maybe those books weren't appropriate.
Well, Alex
maybe
Jones's
we should
book
burn them.
Should be burned, because he's a liar, and he's a conspiracy theorist, and he's a jerk, and look what he said about those Sandy Hook kids. And it's like, so what?
Yeah, that's your reaction.
My reaction is, let him say whatever. I don't care. I don't care if he's horrible.
Right, because the truth, and the truth wins out, and when people are rational, the person that makes the best argument, will win in the long run. And that's what you rely on when you're a real advocate of reason. So in fact, I love it when dumb people get up. A lot of times you see this tendency of people like, oh, I hope they don't let her speak or something. I'm like, let AOC speak.
Right.
Oh my God. Every time she opens her mouth.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do is make someone a martyr.
As long as I'm fine with AOC speaking, as long as her critics can also speak.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when it gets scary is when there seems to be this, and this is what they are trying to create, explicitly trying to create, is a world where only certain people can speak. And, you know, approved people with approved ideas can speak. And that then, you know, that's where it's going wrong. And here's the encouraging thing is that we have been in a world where they have had pretty much control over the narrative. And the reason things have gotten so heated is because of the internet. And it's like the printing press in a way. It's like suddenly more people have access. I was listening to this, by the way, this is now another side note. If you're not following the Epoch Times, you're missing a bunch of really good journalism and reporting on the culture. So I watched an interview today with a guy who wrote a book. I don't know the name of the book, but he was talking about, where was I going with this? Dang it. I'm picturing the guy's face. What was I just saying?
The Epoch Times.
Before that. I'm going to have to edit this whole awkward thing out. I never edit. Oh
yeah, I just lost my train of thought at the same time you did.
I was going on this aside about reading the Epoch Times, and I lost my train of thought. I was talking about what this guy said. Oh, man. I almost want to stop the tape and go back and remember what I was saying.
Well, pause it.
All right. All right. I've never done this before, but I stopped the podcast in the middle and went back and listened to what I was saying so that I remember what I can say. I was right in the middle.
Older.
Yeah. Oh my God. So what I was saying was the encouraging thing is they used to own the narrative. So I'm watching this Epoch Times interview. This guy is saying literacy rates right now are 50% in this country. Is that a jaw-dropping number or what?
50%?
50% of Americans are not functionally literate.
That can't be true.
That's what this guy is saying. And yeah, it's a shocking number. But if you think about what's going on in our schools today, and then if you think about like immigration and stuff and the kind of immigrants that are coming in, you could probably believe that. So half the country can't really read. And then the internet comes up and now people are watching YouTube. You know?
Yeah.
Or like take young kids who maybe they can read, but they don't really.
Yeah.
But they watch YouTube. You know, so a lot of ideas are being disseminated via video and podcasting.
Oh yeah, and in tweets. I mean, this is how people are interacting with one another.
Well, tweets is sort of reading. So I'm saying like the listening or the watching.
Yeah.
And you're getting more information that way than ever before. And it's kind of like that moment in history when the printing press started so everybody could get their hands on books. And then you had this culture that came out of that of people who emphasized literacy. And early America, even poor kids could read. I mean, because it was regarded as such an important thing.
Yeah, and the government was fully in favor of actual real education. Like the Jeffersons wanted people, they recognized that people needed to be highly educated to live in an advanced society where you're supposed to rely on your own ability and your own effort to succeed and to manage government appropriately.
Yeah, and learning to read was kind of like like a gift from your ancestors. You know what I mean? Like it was your destiny to carry the torch and learn to read and be a citizen. And today, you know, we don't read. We watch Kardashians. We watch a lot of TV. So anyway, they used to control all of that. And then the internet has changed that. And it's one of the reasons that they're freaking out. And Trump happened. And Trump it's not Trump that's the problem. It's what is coming in his wake. It's the meme war. It's the people being free to be absolutely contemptuous of the left. And of the racism and the cancel culture of the left and the contempt we all have for it, and we voice and we poke fun at it, that is the big threat.
Yeah, and to the establishment media.
Yep.
And their ability to control that narrative.
Right. So
he's blown that up.
The fact that it just sort of feels really bad right now, I mean, I kind of feel like I'm not saying that they don't have a lot of power, and we could definitely lose this culture war. But the reason it's heating up like this is because of the dissemination of ideas more freely and widely as a result of the internet in the last 20 years. So that's kind of exciting. I mean, we are living in a time of massive change because of the internet.
It's kind of a case of what being affected by what we didn't know. In other words, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, there was all sorts of stuff really happening that you would never have known about because the media, there was a couple of newspapers and a couple of TV stations, and they were part of the establishment media, and they controlled what people learned, and they controlled how people viewed world events and what the government was doing. And there was no pushback. There was an alternative, but it was very fringe. So
do you remember go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, imagine all the things that would have been reported and would have been understood, and how people would have responded to various events if we had a more open media, or we had more free media at that time, and some form of internet. I mean, the whole world would be different. And so, it seems like it's sort of like one of those cases where it seems worse to us,
right?
But in reality, it's only because
I think we
haven't been spoon-fed
right
the bullshit narrative that kept everyone, sociant for so long.
Yeah, I think it's maybe. I mean, it's a kind of, I hope we win. Obviously, I hope we win. There are some really seriously evil totalitarians moving in that are in power, I mean, creepy people like AOC
right.
and Ilhan Omar, and the Green New Deal, even that is even at all taken seriously by anybody is frightening to me. Because it's such a crazy, I mean, she's talking about cow farts, y'all. And like all of a sudden in the last year, having babies should we have kids? And young white women are taking the pledge and getting sterilized as if it's white women in the West who are causing overpopulation. And weird movements like that, and movements like, that you just can't even believe anybody would fall for.
But and this thing about like eating this thing about cannibals, like this reminds me of like every idea that now is almost mainstream was a crazy idea to us.
Right.
Like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, all the stuff that... If
someone said 20 years ago there'd be a movement, a serious movement to ban meat, would you have been like, what? I mean, it's just impossible.
Yeah,
but
right.
That is a serious movement in the last year to
or
ban
like transgender people in bathrooms. I mean, you'd be like 20, you'd be like, oh my God, that's crazy. And now if you say that, you could get fired, or if you oppose that, you get fired. And so, maybe in 2 years, it's like, maybe cannibals, I don't know, maybe that's not a bad idea, and this movement that's starting, and it's the most frightening one. I referenced this before, this New York Times op-ed by that Harvard law professor, this Noah Feldman, who had come out at one point in favor of Sharia law. This is the guy that's saying, I don't know about this First Amendment, if we allow that, then
how do we loves Sharia law, and he also doesn't like the First Amendment.
How do we limit fake news and online and they always couch it that way.
Right.
That like they always that,
we just lost
we're
you.
just trying
Will
to limit.
Say what you were going to say again.
I said they're always trying to tie the concept of free speech to some form of violence, as if we allow it,
shooting,
there's going to be fake news and online harassment.
Charlottesville, as if that was all the right's fault or something. That the one guy, I mean, I'm not saying you should get in your car and ram anybody, but the whole environment was charged because a group of people were not allowed to protest, which is their fucking American right. And Antifa should have been kept from harassing and bothering them, and instead they were allowed to harass and bother them. And then you end up with a death, and everyone blames only the protesters.
And the whole concept of allowing it.
Right.
And you know what's funny to me is the phony standard implied by this idea, which is that we should all live in these sort of like quiescent, cages or something, and all be free from offense and from anxiety over what people say. You know, a free culture, in other words, like what is this, like online harassment or hate speech or fake news or whatever? Like, why should we be protected from that? Like, we're reasoning human beings. I'll make the decision about what I think is fake or what I consider to be harassing or what I consider to be hateful, right? I mean, that's my decision to make. It's not your decision to make. So what is the standard that they're tethered to, whereby they determine the standard of, in other words, they kind of slip the standard in of, oh, we can't allow free speech because it would offend some. By whose standard, would that offend someone? Who makes that judgment and decision? So they slip that in. And of course we know what the standard is. Don't criticize leftist political policies.
But the other answer is just, so what? Like, I mean, even if someone is influenced by ideas and commits violence, it's still,
of course,
the human being who commits the violent act. It's still that person's fault.
Right.
Nobody's responsible for a person's actions but the individual.
And we do have a standard in the United States, the imminent standard, where it's, and this is what they muddy the water on. But the Supreme Court has an imminent standard where, that defines incitement to violence, and they say that if you are engaging in speech which is meant to provoke violence right now, then, that could be considered incitement, right? If you're like, hey, get that guy. But that's a far cry. Now, these guys are trying to extend this concept of imminence and incitement and say any speech which influences anyone in any way, in a way that I guess they don't like, that maybe down the road could, I listened to George Bush speak, and that made me really think about this, and I hate this. And now, 5 people down the road, some guy tries to kill someone. See what free speech did?
Yeah.
In other words, they're against the whole human form of cognition. They don't think that people can be trusted with ideas.
Right, exactly. And I think
that's the authoritarianism.
Yeah. And that's exactly what's going on in our little microcosm community too. You can't be trusted with the ideas that aren't, the party line or whatever.
No, if we let these ideas get out, then it's going to influence people.
Right.
And so we can't allow that, because we can't trust individuals to reason and think for themselves and to determine what's right and wrong. We have to make that decision for them. And that's what ties this authoritarianism to, us as like sort of classical liberals. And that's why what you're saying is so true, because this is an epistemological, almost metaphysical, like fault line.
Yeah,
where
right.
Either you think human beings are capable of independent thought and making their own choices, and hearing ideas, and then be what it may, that might result in things you don't like.
And I think that is a little scary, because obviously we're living in a time when there are a lot of people who have been convinced that bad ideas are true. And who are ignorant of history, and all the young kids who want socialism and don't want free speech and are buying into Marxism, and who wear the Che Guevara t-shirt and stuff. I mean, they're ignorant, they're stupid, they have a little bit of ideas that someone's shoving down their throat, and they're running with it, and they could end up, especially this whole white privilege thing that everybody's swallowing. This is going to end in white people getting killed. It is already happening.
Yeah.
The whole knockout game or whatever. I mean, the anti-white racism is very disturbing. So yeah, that's happening, but the only way to counter that is to be able to speak out against it. And it is scary to let people think for themselves. But I guess my attitude is, as long as we have and I think Ayn Rand even said this, as long as we have free speech, we can win. So the fight and the battle is for free speech. And Douglas Murray encourages everybody who doesn't have a hierarchy where they will be damaged. It's like our duty to continue speaking about this and speaking out about this because we're the only people who really can. And so to anyone listening who doesn't have a hierarchy, if you haven't spoken out yet or you're not doing it regularly, it may come with a little bit of a social cost. I think I'm paying a little social cost. It's fine. I feel like I need to say what I think, and I need to be that kind of person. And I wouldn't
think of how
respect
much
myself
power
if I
that
wasn't.
like a Dave Chappelle had.
Yeah.
Like that was almost a cultural revolution.
It might be the peak. It might be peak wokeness.
Right.
Peak woke culture may have been the Dave Chappelle moment.
Yeah, because it was like a perfect storm.
I think we might be, we've got Kanye, we've got Chappelle. Like, I think, and I don't even, like, Dave Chappelle, like, sometimes when I defend these people go, oh, yeah, but, like, Tulsi Gabbard, I posted a thing the other day. I'm like, you know what I like about Tulsi Gabbard? She talks. She discusses. She debates. She wants to talk about things. She goes on Tucker. She will disagree with the Democrat establishment if she personally, if she feels like she can do that safely or, with certain ideas that are important to her, like basically foreign policy, she will go against the establishment. That is the kind of Democrat that I'm in favor of because the fault line is who's willing to talk and who's not willing to talk. So it's not even to me left and right anymore. It's the same.
It's the same reason why I support Trump in so many instances. It's not because I agree with. I probably agree with 20% of his policy ideas, maybe 50%. I don't know, something like that. But I disagree and agree with him. The reason I'm so concerned about it is because Elizabeth Warren and people like that frighten the shit out of me. They don't want to talk. They're not trying to have a discussion, and this movement to take Trump down extrajudicially, this sort of like impeachment hysteria where they're trying to overturn the election. That's a breakdown of the rule of law.
And I mean, Trump himself as a personality with all of his flaws, he's at least, I think he's emboldening people to speak out against PC. I've liked that about him from the beginning. I didn't like him, but I liked that about him. And I thought it would be good for the culture, even if he's a total craze person. Just being able to just
take the gloves off.
Speaking out against the charges, like basically having no guilt when someone calls him a racist. And being able to kind of just be like, whatever. Like he doesn't care.
Right.
And that emboldens other people to not care. And that is critical to getting our society back, I think, is, to get out from under this cancel culture. We have to be willing to be called a racist, be called whatever, a sexist, a xenophobe, a chauvinist. And
they call you names. That's their main.
Yeah, it really
is. That's their main device.
They call you names in public. They try to intimidate you. They try to get you fired. But the sad thing is the companies that will actually be influenced by that rather than say, you know what, I'm not going to be harassed into firing a good employee. And if only there were more people like that. And I think, we just need to have more people who will stand up and say, no, I'm not going to listen to the mob. I'm going to keep this person. In my case, it's like, if you're an objectivist, just even continuing to support me, for example, might be a way that you can push against the collectivism that is in our ranks, Just like, no, I'm not going to. It's like when they were like years ago when they were attacking Diana Shea. And it's like, if you're friends with Diana Shea, I'm going to unfriend you. I was like, go the fuck ahead. Like, that's my answer. I'm not going to, in fact, I think I'm going to go, I wasn't friends with her. I think I'm going to go friend her because what are you doing trying to cancel this person?
Yeah, and every time there's like an anti-Trump kind of thing, it makes me support him more. It's just like, all right, you're going to do that? You're going to, all right, fucker,
because
here we go.
Because the line is people who are willing to talk and people who aren't. That's the line. And I'm always going to be on the side, even including a socialist like Tulsi Gabbard. I'm on her side. I want her to be the norm on the Democrat side because then we have our society back. We have our American society back that respects free speech and
is willing to engage in a discussion and an argument and
a respect
point
for
to
individualism,
evidence.
a respect for free speech. This is why we need more Tulsi Gabbard and less, literally the rest of them. So on the Democrat side,
I can't think of another.
Yeah, I can't either. I really, literally can't. They're all just crazy. Anyway, so in your life, maybe you can do that. It's just like all you have to do is push against anybody who's trying to intimidate other people into silence. This is the cultural thing we need to fight against. If somebody's just ad hominem, calling people names and not engaging and not willing to have a civil discussion, that's the problem. And I'm not saying that you go attack people who are mocking and making memes and stuff like that, because those people are great. That's part of being able to say what you want. It's the people who get overly offended and whine and want those people canceled. That's what we're fighting.
Yeah.
Not people who say offensive shit or are uncivil when they're expressing their own ideas. The people who want to shut down people who are expressing ideas of any kind, even if they're offensive. Right. Those are the people that are the enemy.
Right. Right now, that is it.
That is it.
It's not as much about even what the people stand for in many ways. We're at the point, unfortunately, where it's more about standing up for people's right to say what they want.
Or it's not even the right. It's like, I want to live in a society where that's the culture. The legal right is there, but the cultural value is gone in this country.
Yeah, exactly.
We have the right to say whatever, but don't you dare.
Yeah, it used to be like, well, you know what? I don't agree with that. I really respect him, though, because he speaks his mind. He's willing to. He's a straight shooter.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff used to be a real value to people and was seen as idealistic, to be someone who was kind of a free spirit and willing to challenge the norm. And, now, those are demons, people that are offensive or,
right.
And, this is why I like Camille Paglia and people
right.
like that even we probably consider to be on the left, just because there's such fierce proponents.
She's another
Jordan
great
Peterson.
example. She's another great example. She's on the left. She's an explicit socialist, but she speaks her mind, and she's
really not, by the way.
I thought
she's
she
more
has
of a
said
capitalist.
that explicitly. I mean, she's said a few favorable things about capitalism, like basically that we need capitalism and socialism. She supports the mix.
She's
because the capitalism funds the welfare state, but she's pro-welfare state.
Okay.
So, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with her, but I love her. She's fantastic because she is
totally first-handed.
She's first-handed. She's independent. She says what she thinks, even if it goes against the collective, the appropriate thing to say. And she supports other people's right to do that too.
And she's highly educated, so she understands Western culture and the Western canon. She's not ignorant. She completely understands the history of the world, of world religions, of Western literature. I mean, she's really highly educated, and she's a fierce proponent. And by the way, those things are highly correlated.
So what were you going to say about Jordan Peterson?
Oh, I was going to say he's in the same mold in that, I'm sure I would probably disagree with him on certain political things. I don't even know what his politics are completely, but he is absolutely a fierce proponent of independent-mindedness and first-handedness. So these are the kind of, in other words, when it's my issues now are sort of beyond politics in a way. It's more like you started the podcast, where the people that I'm really revering right now are the Charles Murrays and the Jordan Petersons and the Camille Paglias.
Or Brett Weinstein, the guy who stood up against the day of absence for white people on his campus, even though he's a thoroughgoing progressive. But he stood up again. He's still thinking for himself. And he wants to support all people being able to talk and think.
Or even a guy like Tucker, who I don't always agree with or there's all these people.
Yeah.
Dave Rubin.
Right.
He's another great guy. There's they're these, I would almost call them classical liberals.
What do you call it? Dennis Prager, who's like a very religious person. I probably disagree with a lot of things that he thinks, but he's making that movie with Adam Carolla.
Yeah.
About free speech. I mean, these are the people fighting for free speech, and those are the people that deserve our support, even if we disagree with them. The battle is it has come down. We're at the end, in a sense. There are no more political battles except this one. Do the Nazis have a right to walk down the street unmolested, or don't they? Yes, they do. Unless we're at war, or obviously there are exceptions to this. I don't think like a foreign government should have a right to come in here.
It's not do the Nazis have a right? It's more like, do people who support the Constitution and the American tradition have a right to walk down the street?
Well, I guess that's what we're down to. Yeah. Literally, it's like the Americans are the Nazis now.
Yeah, exactly. It's literally true.
Yeah.
It almost reminds me of, Tucker had this great metaphor where he was talking about how there was a time, when kids lie and they say, let's say they stole 10 Oreo cookies and you catch them and they tell a version of the truth where they say, well, I stole 3 cookies, but they admit they stole the cookies, but it's just like a version of the truth. Where the left nowadays, it's not admitting you stole the cookies, it's you stole the cookies.
Right.
They turn it around on you, just like this impeachment stuff, where
Biden
it's like
and his son are corrupt. No, you're corrupt.
No, you're corrupt. You're the one. You're the one who meddled in the election.
Yeah.
You're the one who's. They're the ones who went out and hired Russian spies and agents to compile this dossier to try and undermine Trump. And what do they accuse him of? No, you're the one who conspired with Russia. It's just like.
Oh, projection is the number one. Every time they start saying something, I think, what'd you do? That's the proper thing to think about a leftist. Whenever they open their mouth and accuse anybody of anything, that's what they did. That's so their MO. All right, that's it for our show today. Can you believe how fast that hour went, Doug?
I do believe it. Time goes fast.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the House of Sunny podcast. Go check out Sunny on YouTube at her channel, House of Sunny. Everything Sunny does is fan-funded. And because she's likely to get kicked off and demonetized on every platform at some point, please support her over at patreon.com/House of Sunny. Become one of Sunny's elite squad and have access to behind-the-scenes footage, t-shirts, special events, and more.